Sanibona Dumelang. I deeply apologize for the late start, but I appreciate everybody being here. My name is Mmusi Maimane. I lead the Democratic Alliance, and with me is James South, the chairman of the Federal Executive of the Democratic Alliance. I'll go through the statement as is called, and then subsequent to that, we'll request that we take further questions as we finish the statement. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, fellow South Africans, I think last night for South Africa, not only I, but many South Africans disheartened and angry. The disturbing violence in the House showed quite clearly the true state of our nation. It showed very much so that there's a deeply unpopular government at war with itself and has ultimately broken our parliament and equally so broken the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. As a party, we cannot and we will not let the ANC break South Africa and in fact undo the consensus that we shared in 1994. South Africans quite correctly so were appalled at what they watched yesterday in Parliament. The conduct of Parliament and the conduct of the democratically elected government that we thought would never act in this manner against its own people, realize how far down the path we've gone away from constitutional democracy. We believe that South Africans deserve a new government. They deserve a government that is dear-led, that will ensure that constitutionalism remains at its first and the apex of all accountability. Fellow South Africans, what we saw last night was the ugly face of the ANC. The mission to remove the president and this ANC government from office is now more urgent than ever. In fact, our democracy depends on it. There will be some who, after witnessing last night, may believe that the ANC can be saved. That cannot be so. The ANC cannot revive itself. The shift about creating and electing new leaders is simply a cosmetic exercise. This organization is constitutionally, morally, and intellectually dead. No matter who leads it, it will focus on the few at the expense of the many. I believe without doubt last night was a wake-up call for every single one of us, particularly members of the press who I stood with outside when the police simply refused to allow members of the press to gain access to a duty that is not only enshrined in our Constitution, but to a duty about giving information to South Africans. It's become quite clear. We wait anymore, we'll have no constitutional democracy to speak of. What we desperately need is a movement of people of South Africa who love this country and in fact cannot accept the way it's going. A movement that stands united behind the idea that South Africa can be, of what South Africa can be, not behind a political label or a political policy obsession. No ideas can be too big or audacious for us to consider. If we're in fact going to win, we need a massive, far-reaching realignment, and everything on the. And what I want every South African to know what is happening here in Parliament and how the violence and corruption has taken place is keeping many South Africans locked out of their economy. From the next couple of weeks, I'll be crisscrossing the country to visit many towns and villages to get the word out that this is not about party, this is not about anything else. It's about a movement of South Africans together who say we still hold the 1994 consensus, we still hold to a non-racial South Africa, and we believe that ultimately, collectively together, we can achieve the dream that 1994 promised to us. And so as a start, I'm calling on all opposition leaders, civil society, let's organize, let's mobilize communities, let's get to work, let's raise resources and drive the effort towards achieving the South Africa that Nelson Mandela dreamed of. As far as the president last night, of half-empty promises. to a half-empty parliament. It was defensive, it was racially divisive, and old failed economic policies repackaged as radical, which has failed our young people who make up almost 2/3 of the 9 million South Africans who are without work. The President last night spoke at length about radical economic transformation, yet his State of the Nation address was nothing but radical. The NC's is racialized and anti-poor, designed to serve the powerful elites such as the Guptas, the few, and the top 1% of his own party. Fellow South Africans, I think their policy platform seeks to divide us more, not unite South Africans, not cause all of us to go in the same direction. It'll take this country backwards. And these policies have been tried and tested. It's clear that they failed. And we must, if we're going to stand up together and stand up to the ANC. So if we work together, I believe without doubt, change is coming. We have this morning, I met with our legal team and requested of them to file an application in the Western Cape High Court seeking a declaration that the deployment of the South African National Defence Force members on our precinct for non-ceremonial purposes was unconstitutional and unlawful. And in fact, it was designed to ensure the gradual securitization and militarization of Parliament. And it must, ladies and gentlemen, be halted once and for all. I think it must concern every single one of us that it seems from year to year there is an increase in the number of South African National Defence Force that are deployed. Parliament is now being used as a place where police enter in and out. As a member of Parliament, it became quite clear that this place has now become colonized by the executive for the simple purpose of protecting a president who has no understanding of the rule of law, let alone the Constitution of South Africa. The presence of the South African National Defence Force yesterday far exceeded its ceremonial role. We can't tolerate it. It can't be done. Armed military police completely untenable and unconstitutional and does not help our democracy. I was asked, why did we walk out yesterday? You walk out because, you see, Zuma's already violated the Constitution. To have a speaker who's then enjoined to continue the actions of violating the Constitution, allowing pepper spray that's now been found to be deployed in Parliament, can't be a democratic practice that we become comfortable with, that we are allowed to continue and simply say it is usual for these things to continue. It was clear that even Baleka Mbete did not even know how to follow her own procedures in the expulsion of members in the chamber. All of these actions must be declared unconstitutional and unlawful. Our court action is to ensure that the integrity of Parliament is restored and that the work of Parliament about the people of South Africa must always be about the people of South Africa. And I was on many things. I don't think he's fit to be the President of the Republic. That's why we've moved motions of no confidence. But there have been many presidents before who were not fit. It is well within what we ought to be doing for him to be allowed to table the State of the Nation Address. It's not the platform to discuss that matter. But all falls away when the Constitution is flouted, when the rule of law must be upheld. That is what empowers the business of the people to continue. So our court action is designed solely to say, let's get Parliament working, because when Parliament works, it works for the people. It is an institution that we must fight for, that we must ensure that policies that deal with the poor are debated and discussed so that we can build an inclusive economy. It's an institution that vigorously holds the power of the executive to account. Fellow South Africans, whilst it was not our members who were expelled last night or were kicked out in the most brutal and excessive use of force yesterday, despite that, it should concern every single one of us. I could not be comfortable as leader of opposition last night as I sat on my bench listening to screaming women in the chamber because of the excessive use of force by this parliament. Those white shirts, so-called white shirts, come into the chamber, they use excessive force. It's clear that perhaps maybe tomorrow someone can stand up and put a point against this ANC government, and if they disagree with it, refuse to entertain it, you could be kicked out. Imagine yesterday, in our call for a moment of silence for the 94 victims of Esidimeni, had we wanted and continued to fight that point, could we have been kicked out? Could we have also been forcibly removed for simply raising a point about one of the greatest tragedies in our society? Fellow South Africans, this can't be. It's clear that the distinction between members and other opposition members in the eyes of the security forces will soon be something that becomes irrelevant. We must defend each other, and we must stand united against this tyrannical government that Jacob Zuma is leaving. And we must work together. As I've highlighted, I'll be going to towns and cities in the next number of weeks to speak to South Africans in their homes. As I shared on Wednesday in our speech that we delivered, ours really is to fight for the lost generation, for South Africans who are locked out of the economy. And I'll continue to fight for them. We have a commitment to improving life chances of a generation of young black South Africans who've been let down and locked out by this ANC government. And so my mission for 2017 is to take ideas for rescuing the lost generation to every corner of the country. This year's State of the Nation address will go down as a black mark on our very young democracy. Our call and our commitment now is to focus on unseating the ANC. No one wakes up in any country and says, we have a dictator. It happens gradually through small actions, the use of force, the use of the army, the barring of the media, unconstitutional acts. We must act now before we have no democracy to speak of. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to deal with the court application that we are bringing this morning. We all observed yesterday the use of the so-called white shirts. There is at least some evidence to say that some of those people that were deployed are actual serving members of the South African Police Service. And that would be in violation of a previous court case that we won, declaring that Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges of Parliament Act does not apply to members of Parliament. And if that was the case, then there's a serious contempt of court that occurred last night. But more fundamentally, we had a situation over the last week or so where the President proclaimed that he would be deploying 441 members of the South African National Defence Force, but for the first time he mentioned in the proclamation that they would be assisting the South African police services in maintaining law and order. And that is a particular bridge that was crossed in this particular SONA. It was then a situation where the presiding officers met with representatives of the parties last Wednesday, and the parties were given the categorical assurance that no member of the South African National Defence Force would be used within the precincts of Parliament except for strictly ceremonial duties. So that referred to, for example, the band and the State President's Guard and other people of that nature. It came to our attention around about 6 o'clock last evening that there were heavily armed military policemen and other members of the SANDF who were carrying automatic weapons and sidearms inside the precincts of Parliament in violation, we believe, of Section 4 of the Powers and Privileges of Parliament Act. That was either done deliberately and unlawfully, or that wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Either way, we are seeking to go to court to obtain an order that declaring that the deployment of the SANDF troops for non-ceremonial purposes in Parliament was unlawful and unconstitutional. Secondly, we want to hold those that were responsible for that deployment to be held accountable for allowing such troops onto the precinct. And it may be in the course of this action that we find that the President, the Minister of Defence, or the Chief of the SANDF was complicit in those actions. I myself, when I became aware of the troops that were being deployed in this way, communicated to the Chief Whip of the ANC and showed him the photographs that we had of those troops. He in turn conferred with the Minister of Defence and military veterans. She professed to know nothing about it, but clearly there is something that has gone very seriously wrong, and as Mr. Maimane said, unless we draw the line in the sand now, we're going to be the subject of creeping militarization of the sort last seen during the infamous reign of Mr. P.W. Botha. So we take this matter very seriously. This matter has been done overnight, and the affidavit that will be lodged today of necessity covers only some aspects of our concerns about what happened last night. But we have expressly said in this affidavit that we reserve the right to supplement it should other matters come to our attention that require action by the court. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me take some questions as we go. I'll take 3 at a time and then we go. 2, and then next after that. So let's start. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 quick ones. Mr. Maimane, if you were the speaker, what would you practically have done differently given the noise levels and just the fact that that order had probably gone out of the window? What could she have done differently? Secondly, Mr. Self, what is the sanction that you will seek were anyone to have been found to be in breach of any law or whatever? Or are you just seeking a court order, which clearly is being ignored by the powers that be at home?
Good evening, Mr. Van Powers. Can you just explain your road trips around South Africa? What will they entail? Are you going to be working with any civil society groups or other political parties in particular? Thanks.
Yes, from the eNCA. What was the outcome of your consultations with your lawyers on Wednesday when that statement was first issued by the presidency, saying that it was really good, and could you not have been filed in an interdict before and as a preemptive strike?
Let me take the first and then James. When this matter of the South African National Defence was raised initially, she sent the email to my office. It was at 1:10 1, 1:12 to be exact, for a meeting that starts at 1:45. I mean, I don't know whether she thinks I was sitting in my office waiting for her to call for a consultation of opposition leaders so that we can deal with what is going to happen. So it was clear it was just a farce. She wanted to say she wanted to have spoken to people. And I raised that point, not because of my own personal inconvenience. I raise it because one of the ways we've been able to broker transition in South Africa has been through consensus. And actually saying, okay, how do we deal with this issue? We would have been able to raise with her to say, on the SDMini matter, it might be critical for you to allow the moment of silence. It wouldn't have cost the ANC anything. It's 30 seconds where you can say to the people of South Africa, a tragedy has taken place, therefore you will take the appropriate action. But she couldn't have done the pre-work before that because Baleka Mbete has given a script from the Thule House that simply says to her, you will do 1, 2, 3, and 4. She deviates from that, it would be seen as betraying her own presidential hopeful campaign. Political principles. That's the first. The second about what in fact took place last night. What she should have members are dealt with. I want to deal with the question about the white shirts. It's not unique as a global phenomenon. It's not unique. But those are members that don't come from the SAPS as a start. And in fact, I have now wanting to run an investigation into whether some of those members weren't strategically deployed on the day from SAPS to do that job. They are not trained to remove members of parliament. They are trained to arrest citizens. So what was clear last night was that they obviously went heavy-handed, excessive force. There are some benches were broken. There are members, 3 members of the EFF, I think yesterday were injured. It is not how parliament is supposed to operate. So even in the way she proceeded yesterday, let's take the case of Mr. Madisha. The procedure wasn't even followed. I can't sit here today and say, why was Mr. Madisha kicked? And why? The rules are quite clear. So she must follow the rules so that this thing is effected well. Parliament must convene through the Chief Works Forum to make sure each and every one of those members who are in the white shirts are not ex-SEPs. They are vetted so that they do the work that they're supposed to do in a proper and a disciplined manner. She didn't seek to build consensus. She did not, in fact, look to engage as to what was happening. She stuck to a script, really failing the people of South Africa. I maintain, I'll say it here, Baleka Mbete is not there to defend the Constitution. She's there to defend Jacob Zuma. That's why she can't follow her own rules. The Nkandla ruling made that explicitly clear. She's violated the Constitution, her own self. And contrast her with Thandi Modise, right sitting in the chair. It was clear that even Thandi could say to Bongo, whoever that MP was, in a firm, strict manner, let's not be partisan here. Let's be firm. But Baleka does not show what partisan means. I think he has acted not only in violation of the Constitution, but also against her own rules. And then when the deployment of the pepper spray was there, my wife was there, many of our guests were there. It would have cost her nothing to simply stop proceedings and say, can we investigate that matter? Can we pause what is happening here? Take the sting out of the room so that in fact we can execute State of the Nation in a proper manner. She didn't apply her mind because she's got a script written to her by Jacob Zuma himself, most likely. So I think it was a failure on her part. Let me take the second question. The first starting point that we've got is to engage opposition parties. Leaders of opposition parties, I think, subsequent to the coalition that took place in 2016, as far as local government is concerned, have all agreed that we may differ ideologically in certain instances. But what we agree on is that the ANC is not good for South Africa. Therefore, in the respective metros that we govern, it's going to be important that we engage the opposition movement so that we can galvanize together to say it's better for us to remove the ANC sooner rather than later, democratically. Furthermore, I've always been engaged in the process of engaging civil society. That's not new. I met with the civil society even late last year, even around the fees issue, around various aspects of what happens in a constitutional democracy. So I'll be engaging them to say, how do we work together to build momentum, to cooperate, because now it's no longer, it's about us beginning a united democratic front that says that we're dealing with an ANC government that simply does not uphold constitutionalism. So that process will begin, and then the roadshow goes to not only civil society, NGOs. I think South Africans want to be heard from. I mean, you know, if you think about it, if you're a resident of Cape Town, and you thought to yourself, there's an opening of parliament, I want to attend it, or I want to come and witness it, you could not get within 2 kilometers of this place. How is that the people's parliament then? Next week, Jacob Zuma will be here for 3 days. Will the same security measures be deployed? So, to me, we have lost the social trust between us, between parliament and the people of South Africa. That trust is gone. We must restore it. We must ensure that we go as leaders of the people to go sit with the people and say, what are the concerns? What are the issues that you want to raise? And let's collectively hold this government to account.
Thank you. Just about the question about the interdict, we did indeed consult our lawyers, and they believed that it was premature to bring such an interdict because it would be on largely speculative grounds, and that we had no hard evidence to say that the Defence Force would not be constitutionally deployed. They advised us to wait and see what happened, and in the event what did happen is, in our view, unlawful and unconstitutional, so we are now taking the requisite action by way of a review. Which brings me on to Yanyan's question. We are seeking to do that decision. We are seeking an order to say that it was unlawful and unconstitutional. And then, as you know, I think it's section 173 of the Constitution allows courts to make a just and equitable order. And in our argument before court, we will then ask the court to make whatever just and equitable order they deem fit to sanction the people who made this possible.
We'll take the next one. Karen. And I think we've pretty much covered. Bao, you have the exclusive rights.
No, thank you. It's an honor.
Lester has undermined that honor. Now he wants a second bite.
Okay, yeah. It's about the two guys standing at the door. Is that something that was discussed for opposition parties? Is it something that we know that we have military guards standing in the house? Has it been discussed? Is it something that everyone is comfortable with in terms of the and the issue of the pepper spray, was it deployed by the EFF, as some people have said, or was it the guards that deployed?
On the SDV, you covered it with Johnny, but I just want a bit more clarity. When you have a big event like SONA, all the papers put out, and we know that that would be the only order of business, how soon could you have notified through the programming committee that the DA would have wanted to table this as part of the orders for the day to have that moment of silence?
Sorry, quick one. Have you spoken to the EFF? What did they tell you? What was the nature of any conversation that might have taken place since last night?
Since last night?
Well, since the event.
I mean, that's a short question. I'll be engaging the EFF only later as part of the broader discussion. I wouldn't have taken them one about last night. I mean, they have to deal with their own program, Mr. Trust. I think, Lester, the question of Esitimeni, even prior, because in and of its nature, it's not an order of business, if you like. It's not a programming question. It's a function of saying, here's an opportunity here. We did request. We had a conversation even with the chief whip of the ANC. I think this will be helpful, and I think it's necessary that at the start of the thing, there is nothing wrong with making that request on the day. We've asked for different requests. We've asked for houses to be adjourned for a number of minutes. That seems to be accommodated immediately. Why can't we accommodate this? So I think there was nothing wrong with being able to say, at that point, we can raise the issue. And equally so, to make it prior to that, we asked in a dignified manner. It is customary that we have a moment of silence for prayer and meditation at the start of any session. So to include that and make it part of the ACT main issue would not be.
And what was the ANC chief's response when you were at the president?
He requested in his way to say we must remove the flags, we must handle this matter in a different manner, we must deal with it in the following week. Why? All of South Africa is watching this moment. I mean, you know, when you think about, take a parallel example, maybe a different one. When you think about terror attacks anywhere else in the world, nations come to a standstill to honor the victims that die, because they stand in solidarity with the victims. When Marikana took place, should stand the nation to a standstill. 94 people have died. 94. How come we fail to just even honor them? It says a lot about this government. It says everything about this government you need to know. And I think it would have been an easy thing to accommodate, and it would have been an appropriate thing to do at the first joint sitting of Parliament. So I think, despite, and his argument to say you must remove that, etc., is simply superfluous, because I think more should have been done. That the president even made his first remarks on the issue last night tells me that either he doesn't value those who are lost out in society, doesn't care. To me, it should have acted sooner. Should have been at the first one to say this is unacceptable in his government. I have family members who are disabled. Imagine if they were exposed to such treatment. It is an injustice. And that the ANC government doesn't see that says everything about the government. And I think yesterday not only was a missed opportunity, but it spoke volumes of the extent of the lack of care the ANC has. Mhlekazwam, you asked the question about, I personally have not noticed the two guards inside. I've never seen it before. Okay? All right.
Yeah, they're aides de camp to the president, and they've been there for as long as I can remember.
So they can have whatever they like there. But you see, the broader concern, even, let's not talk about the two there. I can send you images of men in rifles walking up and down here. This precinct is Parliament. There were school children who were sitting here, they were singing here. Now they have to march a man walking around with an armed ammunition. So when you get a political party being kicked out, could they be met by a different force outside? That's the question we must ask. That's the important issue. And I think the ceremonial nature, I think it's excessive. I think Parliament has now got to a point where we spend 4 million rands on the opening of Parliament, and I'm sure we must do it once in a 5-year term. Parliament must be business. This fanfare of asking people to have a red carpet and army and this, it's a complete farce. It's an emperor trying to project the shallowness of his power. That's what it is. I mean, what next are we going to have? Are we going to have like people jumping in parachutes? It's madness. We should just simplify the thing. It must be dignified but simple. Because what is the focus? If the focus is the ceremony, then we miss the substance of the speech. We've lost out. There are ceremonies, the inauguration, etc. You can do that. But the open, we must open early, we must get in there, we must deliver the speech, we must deliberate about it. It was always about people's business. Imagine if we took that 4 million rand and the use of this 4,000 SEPs and 400. I mean, you know, when we asked for the army to be deployed for young South Africans here who were suffering with drugs, we were given complete disregard for that matter. So when young people are battling with drugs and you ask for the deployment of the army to fight and supplement police, no, that doesn't matter. But no, when it's Jacob Zuma, bring on the more, let's have ceremony, and it's just complete, utter disregard for the people. And I keep saying again, it's a distancing of the ANC, a people's movement. It really is a president's movement, and it's Jacob Zuma. They are all joined at the hip, those people. This issue about the pepper spray, Chief, that's a subject that must be investigated. And that's why it would have been appropriate to investigate it there and then. You can't allow what was deployed up there to continue, because it just becomes hazardous in a parliamentary precinct of that nature.
Some more questions.
Oh, there's more. I get a list.
Council Mayor from Pretoria. Mr. Maimane, you talked about working together to unseat the ANC, to unseat President Jacob Zuma. You've tried in the past with motions of no confidence to remove the president from Parliament. I'm just wondering, is this a project for you, a 2019 project to unseat the government, or are you looking at alternative ways, maybe for early elections, in an effort to remove the government? Is this of such an importance to you that you want to do it as early as possible, or are we looking at a 2019 unseating of the government?
Okay.
I asked this question earlier, because I'm still not sure what would you have done if the two of you were presiding over the legislation. If you have to say that President won't address the House, what would you have done in terms of what the special stage? But also, you voted in favor of these laws to remove, of the rules to remove the elections. What are you anticipating when you supported that rule, as compared to how it's applied right now?
I think those are the last two. Say Vala. Lester, you want? You cover. Anton, you know that majoritarianism in the House and the use thereof is a clear indicator of the fact that the ANC used that in what I personally believe is they are normally in the Constitution. Is that the Constitutional Court found Jacob Zuma has violated the Constitution and upholds, in fact, Chief Justice Mogoeng spoke about Section 89, which when you look at that section, it becomes quite clear that it's grounds for the president to be removed. Yet the courts say you must remove the president. But the citing of that section in that judgment, in fact, had its natural expectation that Parliament would do its job. But the ANC as a collective are not constitutionalists. All of them. So when they voted in defense of Zuma, it became quite clear that they no longer had a deep understanding of constitutionalism. So it's actually when ANC members stand up and say and take an oath to defend the Constitution, they are all violators of it. I think it's wrong to single out Zuma. It's the whole ANC. More to your question, which is about where then do we go? You know, the trending hashtag from yesterday was hashtag change19. This project is about 2019 because I don't want to be found guilty of the same, where we undermine constitutionalism. Elections are elections. We must go to elections. But what I'm saying now is that we must build a momentum of South Africans together to get there. We must work together now to get there. Someone wrote an article to say we've got 2 more of these sonars. 2 more. It's going to be a nightmare. So we must build that movement going forward. And this is where you raise this question about rules. I already responded to say, Balega did not follow rules yesterday. She did not. How many members, for example, in the procedure, it makes it quite clear. You must cite each member individually. How many were cited individually yesterday? Only 2, yet the entire party was removed. I raised the point about how you remove people. We've never been given, well, certainly, we need to be satisfied with an entire list of people who are independent, not SAPS people, not the army, that say they have the ability to remove members of parliament in a dignified manner. Yesterday was a political party and members of parliament being beaten up. There's a big difference between removing people and beating them up. So to me, and the eNCA applauded those actions. They applauded them. So I'm saying she did not follow the rules. She has not capacitated parliament to remove people in a dignified manner. Because, of course, you can't have a member who simply continues to say, no. This thing is not going to proceed and hold the whole of South Africa ransom for internal political issues, because the fight between them is about the ANC. No. It needed to be in a dignified manner. But also I raised the point that when the pepper spray was deployed, stop the proceedings so that it's investigated properly, so that we can come back to it and then resume again. There would be nothing wrong with a 15-minute interjection. Stop, 15 minutes, let's go find out what's happening. But she's got a script, so she must play to it. Diabulela, Nkosi. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah, no.